Okay, let's dive into this. If you're a dog owner, well, chances are you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments when your furry friend acts, well, let's call it unruly.
Right.
Jumping on guests, maybe pulling your arm clean off on walks, barking at, well, seemingly nothing,
Mhm.
or deciding your sofa is actually a giant chew toy.
Yeah, it's
Um,
frustrating. It can be embarrassing
it definitely doesn't help that bond you're trying to build, does it?
Not at all. It's incredibly common, and honestly, for a lot of owners, these kinds of behaviors are the biggest challenge they face. Sometimes it can even, put the dog's place in the home at risk.
That's serious. The
Yeah.
sources we're looking at today, they offer a really practical, almost clinical guide to understanding and, importantly, tackling these behaviors.
They really do. They cut through a lot of the sort of noise and maybe some old school thinking that's still out there.
So our goal for this deep dive
Mhm.
is basically to pull out the most important, actionable stuff directly from this material.
Exactly. We want to help you get past the frustration, understand the real reasons why your dog might be doing these things, and crucially, give you some effective, positive, science-based ways to manage them.
And right up front, I think it's fair to say these sources are going to challenge some common ideas, yeah?
Definitely.
Like the whole idea that your dog's being stubborn or spiteful or trying to, dominate you. And we'll see why that's probably missing the mark.
Completely.
We'll also cover the absolute first step you have to take when you see these behaviors pop up, and then dig into the specific positive methods that actually work.
Okay, so where do we start? I think maybe defining what the sources actually mean by unruly behavior, because it might not be what you think.
That's a great point. It's a crucial distinction the sources make, isn't it?
Mm.
They really emphasize that unruly doesn't usually mean the dog is doing something fundamentally wrong for a dog.
Exactly. That's a core insight here. These behaviors, the jumping, the barking, the chewing, pulling on the leash, they're almost always normal dog behaviors. Yeah, normal canine behaviors. The problem isn't usually the behavior itself. It's that it's happening in the wrong context, or maybe at the wrong time, or it's just, too intense for the human world we expect them to fit into.
Right. So when my dog is, I don't know, happily shredding a pillow, he's not sitting there thinking, ha, that'll show him.
No. The sources are very clear on this. They really push back hard against that idea that dogs act out of spite or some desire for dominance, like we understand it.
That whole anthropomorphizing thing, giving them human motives.
Precisely. It's just not helpful, and according to these sources, it doesn't line up with what we actually understand about canine behavior. Getting this shift in perspective is kind of your first big step towards finding solutions.
Because then you stop punishing what you think is defiance.
And you start addressing the actual underlying reason for the behavior.
Okay, so if it's not spite or dominance, what is driving these normal behaviors to become, well, problematic? What are the root causes the sources point to?
Well, the sources lay out several key factors. One of the biggest, simply unmet normal canine needs.
Like they just need to burn off energy? Is that the main one?
That's a huge part of it, yeah. A dog with tons of energy who isn't getting enough physical exercise, and exercise that's right for their breed and age well, they're likely to find other, less desirable outlets for it.
Makes sense.
But it's not just physical. Mental stimulation is just as important. Dogs are smart,
Yeah.
They're problem solvers.
Right.
So if they're bored, if they don't have appropriate things to do, they'll often invent their own entertainment.
Which might involve chewing the furniture or barking nonstop.
Exactly. Boredom comes up again and again in the sources as a really significant driver. A lack of good outlets for just natural dog stuff, chewing, digging, sniffing, exploring, even barking sometimes, that contributes heavily.
Got it. So unmet needs, boredom, what else?
Lack of, or maybe inconsistent training. That's fundamental. The dog simply hasn't been clearly taught what behaviors we expect. Think about walking on a leash. It's not natural for a dog to just trot politely by your side. They have to be taught that loose leash walking pays off.
Right.
If they haven't learned that, well, pulling is just the fastest way to get where they want to go. It works for them.
They're just doing what seems logical if we haven't shown them a better way.
Precisely. And the sources also highlight anxiety and fear as major potential drivers.
Wow. Okay.
Stress, emotional distress, these can absolutely show up as hyperactivity, destructive behavior, excessive barking, or just an inability to settle down.
Like separation anxiety.
That's a classic example, yeah. Where the fear of being alone leads to maybe destructive chewing or barking or house soiling.
So a dog tearing up the house might actually be terrified, not just bad.
Very often, yes. And something absolutely critical to sources stress is ruling out medical issues.
Okay.
Pain, discomfort, some underlying illness, hormonal imbalances, even neurological problems can cause big changes in behavior. A dog might start chewing like crazy because of a painful tooth, or become really restless and destructive because of, say, thyroid issues, or maybe they suddenly seem stubborn about sitting because they have arthritis pain.
That's eye-opening.
Yeah.
You could easily blame the dog for being defiant when they're actually just hurting.
It's a vital piece you just cannot overlook. The sources also mention genetics and breed predisposition.
Breed traits.
Yeah. Now, it's not an excuse, but some behaviors are just naturally stronger in certain breeds, right? A border collie is wired to chase, a lab loves to carry things, a terrier might have a strong urge to dig.
Recognizing those innate drives helps.
It helps manage expectations and tailor your training, definitely. And finally, learned behavior. This one's huge.
How so?
Behaviors are often inadvertently reinforced by our reactions, even negative reactions.
Like yelling.
Yeah. If a dog jumps on you and you yell or push them off, guess what? That's still attention. And for a dog who's seeking interaction, sometimes any attention is better than being ignored. So the behavior gets reinforced, even though you didn't mean to.
That's the trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
We react maybe out of frustration, and they learn, oh, doing this gets a reaction.
It absolutely is. They learn that jumping or barking or nudging gets your focus. And, understanding this whole list of potential causes leads us straight to the absolute non-negotiable first step the sources recommend for any new or worsening unruly behavior.
Which is?
Get your dog checked by your vet. A thorough veterinary examination first stop.
Okay, why do the sources insist this has to be the very first thing you do?
Because you must rule out any underlying medical cause first. Simple as that.
Right, like we just talked about.
Exactly. Pain, illness, other physical conditions can cause or seriously contribute to behavioral changes. Training can only really work if the dog is physically and mentally capable of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if their behavior isn't being driven by some kind of discomfort, trying to train away pain is, well, it's impossible and it's unfair to the dog.
You can't train a dog not to feel arthritis pain or a toothache.
You got it. And as part of this initial workup, the sources really highlight how important it is for the vet or maybe a behavior professional to take a really comprehensive history.
More than just what's the problem.
Oh, yeah. Details about the specific behavior, sure, but also the dog's whole social life, previous training, their diet, daily routine, the home environment, and critically, this is important, any history of punishment that's been used.
Why is knowing about past punishment so crucial for the assessment?
Well, the sources explain that punishment can have pretty significant negative impacts on behavior. It often increases fear or anxiety.
Which can then cause more unruly behaviors.
Exactly. It's vital context for understanding the dog's behavioral history and maybe even their relationship with their owner.
Okay, so vet check rules out medical stuff. Thorough history gets context. Once medical issues are off the table, what are the sort of guiding principles the sources promote for actually managing and changing these behaviors?
The foundation, according to this material, really comes down to meeting the dog's basic needs and then combining that with positive reinforcement and absolute consistency.
Okay, so we talked about unmet needs being a cause, and now it's also a key part of the solution.
Absolutely essential. You've got to provide adequate, appropriate exercise. Really think about your specific dog's breed, age, energy level.
Right.
Mental stimulation is vital too. Training sessions, puzzle toys, scent games, just letting them really sniff on walks.
Brain games.
Brain games. And providing appropriate things to chew. Don't just toss them one old Nylabone. Offer a variety of safe, appealing chews and maybe rotate them to keep things interesting. Redirecting that natural urge to chew onto the right items is key.
Okay, exercise, brain games, chew toys, foundational.
Yeah.
And then positive reinforcement. You hear this everywhere in modern dog training.
It's completely central to the approach in these sources. And for a very good reason. The principle is pretty straightforward. You immediately and consistently reward the desired behaviors, the things you want to see more of. Like when the dog's paws are on the floor instead of jumping on someone, reward that right then. When they're slack in the leash, reward that. When they pick up their chew toy instead of your running shoe, reward that.
And use good rewards.
Yes, high-value rewards. Stuff your dog really loves. Tasty treats, enthusiastic praise, maybe a quick game with a favorite toy, whatever motivates your dog.
So it's really about teaching the dog what you want them to do, not just constantly correcting what they shouldn't.
Precisely. You're essentially making the good behavior more worthwhile, more rewarding than the unwanted one. And tied directly, to using positive reinforcement is the very strong recommendation against using punishment.
The sources are really firm on avoiding punishment methods, aren't they?
They could not be clearer. They strongly advise against things like physical corrections, yelling, using tools like shock collars, prong collars, or harsh leash jerks.
Why such a hard line against those?
Well, the sources detail the negative fallout. Punishment often only suppresses the behavior temporarily, maybe only when you're right there watching. It doesn't actually teach the dog a better alternative behavior for when you're not around. Crucially, it can significantly increase fear, anxiety, and stress.
Which, as we said, can actually cause many of these unruly behaviors in the first place.
Exactly. It can seriously damage the trust and bond you have with your dog, which makes all training harder. And perhaps most concerning, the sources indicate it can actually increase the risk of aggression.
Wow, that's a compelling list of reasons against it. It sounds like it often creates more problems than it solves.
In many cases, yes. The goal here is to build a positive, trusting relationship based on cooperation, not fear.
Makes sense.
Consistency is another absolutely critical piece. Everyone in the household needs to be on the same page with the plan.
Yeah. One person lets the dog jump, the other doesn't scenario.
Exactly. Those mixed signals completely confuse the dog. It makes it basically impossible for them to learn reliably what's expected. And finally, the sources emphasize management and prevention. This is huge. It's all about setting your dog up for success by preventing them from even having the chance to practice the unwanted behavior while you're still working on training.
How do you do that?
Using tools like leashes indoors, baby gates, crates, or just close supervision to block access to situations where they typically perform the problem behavior.
Because every time they successfully raid the counter or jump on grandma?
They get better at it.
Right.
If they counter surf and snag a piece of chicken, they've just hit the jackpot. Management stops that rehearsal. It stops them from being accidentally rewarded for the very thing you don't want them to do.
Okay, that's a really solid framework. Vet check first, understand the cause, meet their needs, use positive reinforcement, absolutely no punishment, be consistent, and manage the environment.
That's the core of it.
So let's get practical. How do these principles actually translate to dealing with those common unruly behaviors? Maybe starting with jumping up on people. Everyone hates that.
Yeah, it's a common one. The sources give clear strategies. For jumping, the main technique is teaching 4 on the floor.
Okay.
When the dog jumps, you immediately withdraw all attention. Turn away, no eye contact, no talking, no pushing them off. Remember, pushing is still interaction.
Become boring.
Utterly boring until all 4 paws are back on the ground. The instant they are, you mark it maybe with a yes and reward them. High value treat, praise.
So the dog learns jumping makes the fun human disappear, but keeping my paws down makes good stuff happen.
Exactly. You're reinforcing the state you want. You can also proactively teach an incompatible behavior.
Like what?
Like asking for a sit when someone approaches for greetings and then rewarding that sit heavily. The dog can't sit and jump at the same time.
That's all.
And manage greetings. Keep them calm. Maybe have the dog on leash initially. Greet people outside first where there's more space.
Okay, how about excessive barking? That can drive owners and neighbors absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah. First step, as always, try to figure out the why. Is it boredom? Attention-seeking? Fear? Is it territorial, like barking at the mail carrier?
Right. Different causes need different approaches.
Precisely. If it seems like boredom or attention-seeking, step up the exercise and mental stimulation first. For attention barking specifically, the sources suggest ignoring it, like the jumping.
Just let them bark.
Initially, yes. But be prepared for what's called an extinction burst, meaning the barking might briefly get worse, louder, more intense, right before the dog gives up because it's not working anymore.
Like they're double checking. Are you sure you're not going to react this time?
That's a good way to put it. For alarm or territorial barking, management is key. Block their view out the window with curtains or frosted film. You can also work on teaching a quiet command. Let them bark a couple of times, then say quiet. And the instant they pause, even for a second, reward them. Gradually extend the duration of silence. If the barking seems rooted in fear or anxiety, though, that needs a different approach, focusing on the underlying emotion. We can touch on that more.
Okay. Leash pulling. Another classic.
Yeah.
Makes walks just miserable sometimes.
Yes, the dog pretending to be part of a sled team. Loose leash walking training is the answer here. The core principle is pretty simple. Reward slack in the leash.
How does that work in practice?
A common method is the stop and go, or be a tree method. The instant the leash tightens because the dog pulled, you stop moving. Dead still.
Become a tree.
Exactly. You only start walking again the moment the leash goes slack, even a little bit, and then you immediately reward that slack leash, maybe with praise or a quick treat.
So the pulling literally gets them nowhere.
Mm.
Tight leash means the walk stops.
Precisely. They learn pretty quickly that a tight leash stops all the fun, while a slack leash makes the walk happen and might get them rewards. The sources also recommend using appropriate equipment while you train.
Like harnesses.
Yes. Specifically, front clip harnesses. The sources might mention brands like the Easy Walk or head halters like the Halti. These give you more mechanical advantage to guide the dog without causing pain or choking.
And they specifically advise against prong or choke collars.
Strongly against them, yes, due to the risks of pain, injury, and negative associations we talked about.
And I imagine starting this training in a really quiet place, not the busiest park, is probably key.
Oh, absolutely. Start in your hallway or backyard. Build success in low distraction areas first, then gradually increase the challenge. And, one interesting little point the sources sometimes mention is just remembering that your dog's natural walking pace might just be faster than yours.
Ah, good point.
Sometimes part of the solution is just picking up your own pace a bit when it's safe and appropriate.
Okay. Chewing and destructive behavior. The bane of shoe collections and furniture legs everywhere.
Right. The key here is providing an abundance of appropriate chew toys. Don't skimp. The sources stress variety, different textures, shapes, sizes, and rotating them to keep them novel and interesting.
Keep things fresh.
Yeah. Supervise your dog closely, especially puppies or newly adopted dogs who haven't learned the house rules yet. And use those management tools, crates, baby gates, exercise pens when you can't supervise directly. Prevent the mistakes.
Makes sense.
Bitter sprays on furniture legs or cords can also help deter chewing for some dogs. And again, always consider if underlying anxiety might be playing a role, especially if the destruction happens mainly when the dog is left alone.
What about stealing things or counter surfing? That high-stakes game of snack acquisition.
Yeah, the opportunists. Management is absolutely paramount here. It's the #1 strategy. Keep your counters clear, put food away immediately, don't leave tempting things out, use gates or crates to keep the dog out of the kitchen when you're cooking or eating. Basically, don't set them up to fail.
Prevent the opportunity.
Exactly. Alongside that, teach really strong leave it and off commands, rewarding heavily when they comply. And never reward the stealing, not even accidentally by giving them a tidbit from the table after they just tried to grab something.
What if they do manage to grab something they shouldn't have?
Good question. Especially if it's something valuable or potentially dangerous, or if the dog might guard it, the sources strongly advise not chasing them. That often turns it into a fun game for the dog.
So what do you do?
Instead, try trading up. Casually approach with a really high value, treat something better than what they have, and offer a trade. Or scatter a handful of tasty treats on the floor a little distance away. Often, they'll drop the forbidden item to go investigate the treats, and you can safely retrieve it.
Trading sounds much smarter and safer than trying to wrestle something out of their mouth.
Far safer and much more effective long term. It teaches them that giving things up to you is actually rewarding. The sources also suggest maybe keeping a log or even setting up a camera if it's happening frequently to figure out the motivation.
Like, when does it happen?
Right. Is it mostly when you're gone? That might point towards separation anxiety. Is it just when food is left out? That's opportunistic. Management is key there. And sometimes it's worth double checking your diet. Are they getting enough calories? Are they actually hungry? Motion-activated deterrents, like compressed air cans placed on the counter, can also be useful for some dogs.
Okay, last one from the common examples. Chasing. Bikes, squirrels, joggers, cars. That can be scary.
Yeah, chasing is a really powerful, often self-rewarding natural drive. It's especially strong in certain breeds, like sighthounds or herding breeds. Management is critical, again, for safety, keeping them securely leashed or in a fenced area whenever those triggers might be present.
What about training?
Head collars can provide better physical control while you're training. The main approach the sources recommend is using desensitization and counter-conditioning, often abbreviated as DSCC.
Okay, what does that involve?
It involves teaching your dog really solid impulse control commands first, like sit, stay, and particularly a strong look or watch me command. Yeah, where you train them to make eye contact with you on cue, rewarding them heavily, maybe by bringing a treat right up to your eye. It redirects their focus to you.
Got it.
You practice these skills really well in quiet environments first. Then you gradually introduce the chasing triggers, say, a bicycle, but at a very far distance, where your dog notices it but doesn't react strongly, or maybe just pricks their ears.
Start easy.
Right. And you reward them for staying calm, or for choosing to look back at you instead of fixating on the bike. You want to change their emotional response.
From, ooh, must chase, to,
Oh, there's that bike thing, but looking at my human gets me awesome treats. Over many sessions, you slowly, carefully decrease the distance to the trigger, always keeping the dog under their reaction threshold.
it sounds like it takes a lot of patience. And it also sounds like anxiety can kind of weave its way through a lot of these different behaviors we've talked about.
It absolutely can. The sources definitely highlight that when these unruly behaviors seem to be driven primarily by anxiety, whether it's separation anxiety, generalized fear, noise phobias, whatever, it really requires a more focused approach.
More than just basic training.
Often, yes. For severe or complex cases, the sources strongly recommend seeking help from a specialist, specifically a board-certified veterinary behaviorist, a DACVB.
Okay, a specialist for the really tough behavior issues.
Exactly. These professionals have the expertise to diagnose complex cases accurately and design very tailored behavior modification plans. These plans often rely heavily on that desensitization and counterconditioning we just mentioned, but applied very specifically to the dog's triggers and fears.
What about medication? Is that ever part of the picture?
Yes, the sources make it clear that especially in these anxiety-driven cases, pharmacological intervention medication may be a crucial part of the treatment plan.
But it's not a magic pill, right?
No, absolutely not. It's not a standalone fix. But medication can be used in conjunction with behavior modification. The idea is to help lower the dog's underlying anxiety level enough so that they are actually capable of learning new things and benefiting from the training.
So the medication essentially helps make the training possible by calming them down enough to learn.
Precisely. It helps shift their emotional state so their brain isn't totally overwhelmed by fear or anxiety, allowing them to engage with learning new, calmer responses. Providing a very predictable daily routine and consistent positive enrichment activities is also vital for managing anxiety, according to the sources.
Okay. So looking at the bigger picture here, someone's really grappling with these challenges. What's the general outlook? What's the prognosis like based on this material?
Well, the sources suggest the prognosis really depends on a few key things. The underlying cause is a major factor.
Make sense?
If the behavior is primarily due to, say, unmet needs, boredom, or just a lack of basic training, the prognosis is generally excellent with the right positive approach. These issues are usually highly responsive.
That's really encouraging for a lot of the common problems people face.
It absolutely is. Now, if the behavior stems from severe, deep-seated anxiety, or maybe a complex medical condition, the prognosis might be more guarded.
Meaning?
Meaning it might take longer, require more intensive intervention, maybe from specialists, or perhaps management strategies might always need to be part of the picture to some degree. However, even in these tougher cases, significant improvement is often very possible with a well-designed, consistently applied plan.
And the owner's role.
Owner commitment is absolutely paramount. The sources stress this. Consistency, patience, actually following through and implementing the recommended strategies day in, day out, that's critical for any positive outcome.
It's definitely not a quick fix. It requires real dedication from the owner.
It really does. The sources also generally note that intervening earlier tends to lead to a better prognosis. Addressing these issues when they first start cropping up is usually easier than trying to modify behaviors that have been practiced and reinforced for months or years.
Makes sense. Habits get ingrained.
Exactly. And they do specifically mention that chasing behaviors, probably because that drive is so innate and self-rewarding, can sometimes be more challenging or resistant to change compared to things like jumping or leash pulling.
Okay, let's try to bring this all together. For someone listening right now who's maybe feeling overwhelmed, living with some of these challenges day to day, what are the absolute non-negotiable key takeaways from this deep dive that the sources really want owners to grasp?
Yeah, okay. The sources really hammer home a few core messages. First, remember, these are often normal canine behaviors just happening in inappropriate ways or contexts. Try to let go of that idea that your dog is being spiteful or trying to dominate you. That mental shift is huge.
That reframing alone can change how you react.
It changes everything about your approach, really. Second, always rule out medical issues first. That vet check is your absolute non-negotiable starting point. Don't skip it.
Vet check first. Got it.
Third, and the sources could not be firmer on this, absolutely no punishment. Understand why it's counterproductive. Remember, it often suppresses behavior only temporarily, it increases fear and anxiety, it damages your bond, and it carries a risk of increasing aggression. Just don't go there.
Rule out medical, no punishment. Crystal clear.
Correct. Fourth, positive reinforcement is the foundation. This is the most effective, the most humane, and the best way to build your bond while teaching your dog the behaviors you do want to see. Focus on rewarding the good stuff.
Catch them being good.
Exactly. Fifth, be patient and be consistent. Behavior change takes time. It takes effort. And everyone in the household has to be on the same page, applying the rules consistently.
Consistency across the board is key.
Yes. Sixth, really focus on meeting your dog's fundamental needs. Plenty of appropriate exercise, lots of mental stimulation and enrichment, and safe, appropriate outlets for chewing. Address the boredom.
Don't forget the basics.
Never. Seventh, use management and safety strategies, leashes, gates, crates, supervision to prevent your dog from practicing the unwanted behaviors while you're still in the training process.
Set them up for success by preventing the mistakes in the first place.
Precisely. And finally, don't ever hesitate to seek professional guidance when you need it. A certified professional dog trainer, one who uses positive methods, like a CPDT, can be invaluable for general training help.
And for tougher cases.
For more complex issues, especially those that seem rooted in fear or anxiety, finding a board-certified veterinary behaviorist, a DACVB, can provide that specialized expertise you might need. Getting professional support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
That's a really solid, compassionate, and science-backed toolkit drawn straight from these sources, isn't it? Understand the why, check your health, use positive methods, be consistent, manage the environment carefully, and get help when you need it.
It really is. It provides a structured path forward that truly respects the dog's needs and their intelligence.
So wrapping up this deep dive, I guess the core message from these sources is pretty clear. Dealing with those unruly behaviors isn't really about fixing a bad dog at all.
Not at all.
It's fundamentally about understanding normal dog behavior, understanding their motivations, making sure health isn't the underlying issue, and then consistently, patiently teaching and rewarding the behaviors you do want to see using positive, humane methods.
Well said. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something stemming directly from the implications of this material. Just consider for a moment how your entire interaction with your dog might change if you could truly shift your perspective. Move away from frustration at their unruly actions. And instead, try seeing those actions as perhaps clumsy or misguided attempts to meet a perfectly normal canine need, or maybe to communicate a feeling like fear or boredom. Think about the simple yet potentially profound power of proactively focusing on and consistently rewarding the behavior you want to see flourish, rather than just constantly reacting to the behavior you don't.